Nonso, let's go, Uche hissed, grabbing his arm. Nonso hesitated, his feet heavy as if they were nailed to the ground. His eyes flickered to Amaka again, and for the first time, he felt something snap inside him. Regret. But regret wouldn't change anything now. He turned and ran, following Uche and the others out of the house. The night was dark, the streets quiet as they sprinted toward the main road. They ran like hunted animals, their footsteps echoing against the empty town. Uche led them to the nearest bus stop, where a late-night bus was idling, ready to take passengers. "Keep your heads down," Uche whispered as they climbed in. "Act normal." Nonso slid into a seat by the window, his heart still hammering in his chest. His hands were sweaty, his clothes sticking to his skin. He glanced back toward the house in the distance, his stomach twisting. Amaka's broken figure haunted him, her voice replaying in his head like a curse. The driver pulled the door shut and revved the engine. Just as the bus was about to pull away, flashing lights flooded the street. "Police!" a voice boomed over the commotion. "Everyone stay in your seats. Nobody moves." Panic spread through the bus like wildfire. The boys stiffened, their bodies rigid with fear. The officers stormed in, their heavy boots thudding against the metal steps. "There!" One officer pointed directly at Nonso and the others. "Come down now." Nonso's blood ran cold. Uche cursed under his breath. One by one, the officers dragged them out of their seats and onto the pavement. "You thought you could run?" One officer sneered, gripping Nonso's arm tightly. "You're under arrest." Nonso wanted to fight. He wanted to scream. But all he could do was stand there, his hands shaking, his lips trembling. This was it. It was over. As the officers shoved them into the police van, Nonso finally allowed himself to look up at the night sky. The stars, bright and endless, seemed so far away. A single thought raced through his mind, chilling him to the bone. What have I done? The news spread like wildfire. The whisper slithered through the town, creeping into every corner, every household. "Did you hear what happened to Chidi's son? They say he and some gang attacked his own stepmother. That boy was always strange. But this is beyond evil." By the time Chidi's plane touched down, the town was already buzzing with the scandal. He barely had time to catch his breath before his phone rang. It was his neighbor, Mr. Okori. "Chidi." Okori's voice was grave, his words slow, deliberate. "You need to come home now. It's Nonso. It's bad." Chidi's fingers tightened around his phone. "What happened?" he asked, his heart slamming against his chest. Okori hesitated. "He's been arrested. The police caught him trying to run away." Chidi felt the world shift beneath his feet. What do you mean arrested?" There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "It's Amaka, Nonso and some boys. Okori stopped, swallowing hard. "She's in the hospital, Chidi. She's not speaking. She hasn't said a word since it happened." The breath left Chidi's lungs. His vision blurred. His grip on his suitcase slackened, and it dropped to the ground with a dull thud. He stood frozen, struggling to comprehend the words. His son, his own son. Without another word, Chidi flagged down a taxi and ordered the driver to take him straight to the hospital. When he arrived, the air in the hospital room was thick with silence. Amaka lay on the bed, her eyes open but empty, staring at the ceiling as though she were looking past it, past the walls, past this world, past everything. Her once lively face was pale, drained of its glow. Her lips, usually full of laughter, were cracked and unmoving. She didn't even blink when Chidi entered the room. "Amaka," he called softly, stepping closer. Nothing. He sat beside her, reaching for her hand. It was cold, Not from sickness, but from something deeper, from a place beyond pain, beyond sorrow. Amaka, talk to me, he pleaded. Tell me what happened. Her lips parted slightly, just enough to let out a breath. Then, in a whisper so soft it barely touched the air, she said, "It was him." Chidi's hands clenched into fists. He knew who she meant. Nonso. Without thinking twice, he ran out and headed straight for the police station, where Nonso was taken. The police station was dimly lit, the air thick with the stale scent of sweat and regret. Chidi stormed inside, his footsteps heavy, his jaw tight. An officer led him to the holding cell, where Nonso sat on a hard bench, staring at the floor. His son, the same boy he had rocked to sleep, the same boy whose first steps had filled his heart with joy, the same boy whose mother had died, bringing him into this world. Chidi barely recognized him. His hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled and dirty. His eyes, once full of mischief and life, were now dark pools of nothingness. His face held no remorse, no emotion, just emptiness. Chidi stood outside the bars, his breathing ragged. His hands trembled as he gripped the cold metal. "Nonso," he said, his voice dangerously calm. Nonso slowly looked up. His eyes met his father's, but there was no spark, no connection, just silence. Chidi's fingers tightened around the bars. "You're no son of mine." Nonso blinked, but he didn't react. "You've destroyed this family." Chidi spat, his voice thick with pain. "You've destroyed Amaka. You've destroyed everything." Still, Nonso said nothing. He just lowered his gaze back to the floor. For the first time in his life, Chidi felt something he had never felt before toward his own flesh and blood. Hatred. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the station, leaving his son behind bars alone in the darkness. Amaka never returned home. She refused. She refused to step foot into the house where her life had been shattered. The day she was discharged from the hospital, she packed her belongings, called a taxi, and left. She didn't tell Chidi where she was going. She didn't look back. She was done. The morning after Nonso's arrest, Chidi sat in his silent home, staring blankly at the untouched plate of food before him. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. The weight of everything crushed his spirit. Amaka was gone, and his only son was sitting in a police cell, his future in ruins. Then his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but something in his gut told him he should. He picked up. "Hello, Mr. Chidi," a voice said. It was the school principal. His tone was cold, serious. "You need to come to the school immediately. It's about your son." Chidi's heart pounded. "What now?" The principal sighed. "There's something you need to see." At the school, the atmosphere was tense. The teachers whispered as Chidi walked past, their eyes filled with pity and judgment. The principal met him at the office door, his expression grim. "We had to conduct a search after Nonso's arrest," he began, motioning for Chidi to sit. "What we found, it's worse than we thought." The principal opened a desk drawer and placed a small black bag on the table. He unzipped it. Inside, packs of marijuana, small plastic bags filled with pills. Chidi felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. What is this?" he stammered. "This," the principal said, "was found in your son's locker." Chidi's head spun. His fingers gripped the edge of the table. "No, this can't be. There's more." The principal placed another file on the table. Chidi opened it with trembling hands. Inside were written complaints, statements from female students. He read the first one, then the second. His breath hitched. They said Nonso and his friends harassed them, the principal explained. Some even claimed he forced himself on them. Chidi's hands shook violently, his vision blurred. The words on the page twisted before his eyes. No, no, my son wouldn't. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. His mind flashed back to Amaka, the horror in her eyes, the fear in her voice, the way she had whispered, it was him. Nonso hadn't just destroyed his family. He had destroyed other innocent lives too. Chidi stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He couldn't take it. He couldn't breathe. He stormed out of the office without another word, his feet carrying him straight to the police station. The officers at the station barely had time to react before Chidi barged into the holding area. "Where is he?" he demanded. A senior officer stepped forward. "Sir, you can't just..." "I said, where is he?" Chidi roared. His voice shook the walls. One of the officers sighed and pointed to a small holding cell at the back. "He's there." Chidi marched forward, gripping the iron bars. His son sat inside, head down, arms resting on his knees. He looked up slowly when he sensed his father's presence. For a moment there was silence. Then, in a voice filled with quiet fury, Chidi spoke. "Keep him here." Nonso blinked. "Papa?" Chidi turned to the officer. "Keep him here for 7 days. Discipline him however you see fit. Teach him a lesson." The officers exchanged glances. They had seen many fathers beg for their sons, plead for their release. But this was different. "Are you sure?" the officer asked. Chidi's eyes burned with a fire they had never seen before. "I said what I said." Then, without another glance at Nonso, he walked away. Nonso sat there, gripping the iron bench beneath him, watching his father's figure disappear down the hallway. For the first time, a flicker of fear crept into his chest. This time, his father wasn't coming to save him. The 7 days in detention passed slowly. Prayed that by the time Nonso was released, something inside him would have shifted. That maybe the time behind bars would humble him, make him reflect on the destruction he had caused. But when Nonso finally walked out of the police station, there was no sign of remorse. His eyes were colder, his posture was straighter, and his face, it was blank. Chidi stood outside the station, arms crossed, waiting for his son. The officers had done their part, ensuring Nonso faced the consequences of his actions. Some of the officers even shook their heads as they watched him walk out. They had seen many boys break down in those cells, begging to go home. But Nonso had not shed a single tear. Chidi exhaled deeply. "Let's go home." Nonso said nothing. He simply walked past his father, his head held high. At home, the tension was thick, pressing down on the walls like a storm waiting to break. The house, once filled with Amaka's warmth, felt empty now, cold, lifeless. Nonso dumped his small bag in the corner and sat on the couch, stretching his legs like he owned the place. Chidi, still standing by the door, studied him carefully. "Have you learned anything?" he finally asked. Nonso smirked, tilting his head lazily. "Learn what?" Chidi's jaw tightened. "Don't play games with me, Nonso. Do you understand what you've done? Do you even feel anything?" Nonso let out a dry chuckle. "Feel? Papa, you think locking me up for a few days will change me?" His voice turned sharp, mocking. "You really think that will fix me?" Chidi's hands clenched into fists. "You don't get to act like the victim here." Nonso leaned forward, his eyes dark and filled with something dangerous. "You'll regret ever doing that to me." Chidi's breath hitched, There was something in his son's voice, something that made his blood run cold, but he wouldn't show fear. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and spoke with the authority of a father who had had enough. You are going back to school. You will behave, and you will fix the damage you've done. Nonso let out another scoff. We'll see about that. But Nonso didn't fix anything. If anything, he became worse. At school, his presence was like a dark shadow creeping through the hallways. The students avoided him. The teachers feared him. He refused to follow instructions, skipped classes whenever he pleased, and bullied those weaker than him. One afternoon, a teacher caught him sneaking out of the compound with a cigarette tucked behind his ear. Nonso, where do you think you're going? Nonso smirked. Wherever I want. Come back here right now. Nonso rolled his eyes, turning back slightly. Or what? The teacher stiffened, his throat bobbing. Nonso stepped closer, his presence towering over the older man. You think you scare me? He whispered. The teacher stepped back. He had seen that look before. The look of a boy who had nothing left to lose. It wasn't long before the school had had enough. During a disciplinary meeting, the principal sat across from Chidi, his fingers pressed together, his eyes filled with disappointment. I'm sorry, Mr. Chidi, he said, his voice firm, but we can no longer keep your son here. He is a danger to other students. He is expelled. Chidi sat still, his heart pounding in his chest. He had tried everything. But now, even the school had given up on Nonso. The walk home that day was silent. Chidi barely looked at Nonso as they entered the house. The moment the door shut behind them, Chidi exploded. Do you see what you've done? He roared, his voice echoing off the walls. They've thrown you out. You have no future left. Is this what you wanted? Nonso stood in the corner, arms crossed, his face unreadable. I don't care, he muttered. Chidi felt something inside him snap. You don't care? He took a step forward, his fist trembling. After everything I've done for you, after everything your mother died for? Nonso lifted his chin, his voice cold as ice. She's dead, Papa, and so is the boy you raised. Chidi stumbled back as if he had been punched. For the first time, he realized the truth. The son he once knew was gone, and in his place stood something far, far worse. Nonso was now a lost soul. No school, no structure, no purpose. Day after day, he wandered the streets moving like a shadow. He started drinking, sitting with men twice his age, learning their bad habits. He picked fights over nothing, just for the thrill of watching someone cower before him. He became a name people feared. Chidi's son, the troubled boy who had no future. With Amaka gone, Nonso had no one left to restrain him. He roamed the streets freely, causing havoc wherever he went. He drank recklessly, gambled with street boys, and stole from unsuspecting traders. People in town whispered about him. That Chidi's son is beyond redemption. I heard he threatened a shopkeeper just yesterday. God forbid. He will bring ruin to that family. Nothing mattered to Nonso anymore. He was untouchable. Or so he thought. Until the day he made a mistake that even he couldn't undo. It happened in the middle of the afternoon. Chidi had stepped out for a few hours, leaving the house silent. Nonso, lounging lazily on the couch, his mind cloudy from the cheap alcohol he had consumed earlier, suddenly had an idea, a wicked, reckless idea. His eyes wandered to the wooden cabinet in his father's room, the one that held all the important papers. The thought crept in slowly like a shadow slithering through his mind. What if I sold the house? His lips curled into a smoke. Why not? His father had never done anything for him. Nonso wasted no time. He crept into Chidi's room, opened the cabinet, and rummaged through the drawers. His fingers danced over land documents, bank statements, property deeds. Then he found what he was looking for, the house documents. He grabbed them and stuffed them into his pocket. Without a second thought, he stepped out of the house, heading straight for a wealthy man in the neighborhood, Chief Okafor, a well-known businessman. Chief Okafor sat under the shade of a mango tree, sipping palm wine when Nonso approached. "Chief," Nonso greeted, flashing a sly smile. The old man narrowed his eyes. "Nonso, what do you want?" Nonso pulled out the documents and placed them on the table. "I want to sell my father's house." Chief Okafor's hand froze over his cup. He leaned forward, scanning the papers with sharp eyes. He frowned. This is your father's house, Nonso?" Nonso shrugged, his expression indifferent. "And?" Chief Okafor inhaled deeply, then slowly placed the cup down. "Does he know about this?" Nonso smirked. "He doesn't have to. After all, when he dies, the house will be mine. That's my inheritance." The chief's jaw tightened. He had heard about Nonso's reckless ways, but this was beyond foolishness. This was madness. Without a word, Chief Okafor reached for his phone. Chidi was just about to leave the market when his phone rang. He answered without checking the caller ID. "Hello? Chidi, it's Chief Okafor," came the deep voice on the other end. Chidi's brows furrowed. "Chief, what's the matter?" There was a brief silence. Then, "Your son just tried to sell your house to me." The world around Chidi spun. "What?" he choked out. "He came here with the documents saying he wants to sell it." The chief continued. "I stopped him, but you need to come home now." Chidi's hands trembled. His heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum. This was it, the final straw. He hailed a taxi, his mind racing as the car sped toward his house. When Chidi stepped inside, Nonso was sprawled across the couch, his legs propped up, picking at his nails like nothing had happened. The sight of him, lounging so carelessly, after what he had done, made Chidi's blood boil. Without warning, Chidi snatched the house documents from the table and held them up. "You tried to sell this house?" His voice was sharp, slicing through the air. Nonso barely looked up. He shrugged. "Why not?" Chidi's nostrils flared. "Do you even realize what you've done? You were about to sell the only thing we have left, the house your mother prayed for, the house I worked my entire life to build." Nonso sat up, stretching his arms lazily. "So what?" he said, his tone flat. "You've never done anything for me?" Chidi felt the words slam into his chest like a hammer. His hands trembled. His knees felt weak. His son, his own flesh and blood, had just looked him in the eye and said that he had done nothing for him. The sacrifices, the struggles, the prayers, the sleepless nights, the love, all of it, and Nonso thought it was nothing. Chidi swallowed the lump in his throat, his vision blurring. He couldn't do this anymore. He needed answers, desperate, broken. And at the end of his rope, he stormed out of the house and headed for the only person who might have them, the prophet. Chidi sat in the dimly lit room of the prophet's shrine, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, and the flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the mud walls. His heart pounded in his chest, heavy with exhaustion, frustration, and something even deeper, fear. Across from him, the prophet sat still, eyes closed, his wrinkled face unreadable. He had been silent for minutes now, deep in thought or perhaps in conversation with forces beyond what Chidi could see. Finally, the old man opened his eyes. Your son's problems, the prophet said, his voice low and firm, are not ordinary. Chidi swallowed hard. I know that, he said, his voice thick with desperation. I have tried everything, but none so. It's like something else is controlling him. The prophet nodded slowly as if he had already known this. Because something is controlling him. Chidi's breath hitched. The prophet leaned forward, the dim candlelight reflecting in his wise, tired eyes. The boy is a product of a deal made with a deity. Silence. Chidi's body stiffened. His fingers dug into his thighs. A deal? The prophet gave a slow, solemn nod. Yes, your first wife, Ugochi, she was desperate for a child. She sought the help of a deity. She made a promise. Chidi's heart twisted. No, no, that's not possible, the prophet sighed. She prayed for years, but when the prayers failed, she turned to something else. She made a covenant in exchange for a son. Chidi's head spun. But she never told me. She wouldn't have, the prophet said simply. Many who make such deals keep them secret. But the deity never forgets. The price must be paid. And when Ugochi died before fulfilling her end of the bargain, Chidi's chest tightened. The deity turned to the boy. The prophet nodded again. The spirit has been with him since birth, guiding him, twisting him, darkening him. You have not just been fighting his behavior, Chidi. You have been fighting something far more powerful. Chidi felt sick. His mind raced back to all of Nonso's actions. His unnatural attachment to Amaka. His violence, his lack of remorse, his destruction. It wasn't just a rebellious boy. It was something deeper, something darker. He clenched his fists. Tell me what I must do. The prophet closed his eyes again, murmuring a chant under his breath. Then he spoke. To cleanse him, you must make sacrifices. What kind of sacrifices? Chidi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. A goat, a hen, and other specific offerings, the prophet said. But even with this, the boy will always struggle. The spirits will not release him so easily. Chidi's stomach sank. So there's no complete cure? The prophet shook his head. This is not a sickness to be healed. It is a curse to be controlled. You must remain vigilant. If you do not, the darkness will consume him entirely. Chidi sat there, his heart heavier than it had ever been. His son, his only son, was not just troubled. He was cursed. And if Chidi didn't act fast, he would lose him completely. Chidi wasted no time. He left the prophet's shrine with a new determination in his heart. If there was even the slightest chance to save Nonso, he would take it. The next morning, he traveled to the marketplace, carefully selecting the offerings the prophet had listed. A white goat, a hen, palm oil, and other sacred items. He carried them back to the shrine, his hands trembling as he placed them before the prophet. The old man stood by the fire, his robe swaying slightly in the wind. He nodded approvingly. You have brought what is needed. Now, we begin. The night was thick with the scent of burning herbs. The air felt heavy, charged with something unseen. The prophet drew a circle on the ground, muttering chants in an ancient tongue. Chidi watched as the flames from the small fire danced wildly, as if responding to the words being spoken. Nonso stood in the center, his face unreadable. He had barely spoken since Chidi brought him here. He was neither resistant nor cooperative, just there. The prophet sprinkled a mixture of herbs and crushed leaves over Nonso's head. He poured libations onto the earth, whispering words only the spirits could understand. Then he took the goat and made the final offering. The night went still. A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, making the fire flicker violently. Chidi held his breath. For a moment, he thought he saw something move behind Nonso, just a shadow, something unseen, something not of this world. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the wind died down. The prophet exhaled deeply. He turned to Chidi and said, "It is done." Chidi felt his knees weaken. "So he's free?" The prophet shook his head. "Number. The spirits have been appeased, but the boy will always be at war with himself. The darkness may return if he lets it. You must remain steadfast." Chidi swallowed hard. He looked at Nonso, who stood silently, staring at the fire. There was something different in his eyes, not emptiness, but something else, something uncertain. As they walked back home that night, Nonso didn't speak. He didn't lash out, didn't sneer or mock. He simply followed, his steps slow, his shoulders heavy. For the first time in years, there was quiet. But Chidi knew that quiet didn't always mean peace. The battle was far from over. The days that followed were strange. Nonso no longer roamed the streets. He stopped drinking, stopped sneaking out at night. He barely spoke, spending most of his time sitting outside, staring at nothing. At first, Chidi thought it was a good sign, a sign that the cleansing had worked. But he soon realized it wasn't that simple. One evening, as they sat in the courtyard, Chidi spoke softly. "Nonso, how do you feel?" Nonso didn't look at him. "I don't know." Chidi nodded. He had expected that. "Do you remember what happened?" Nonso's hands curled into fists. His jaw tightened. "Yes," he said after a long pause. Silence stretched between them. Chidi sighed. "The prophet said the spirits have been appeased, but he also said the fight isn't over." Nonso let out a dry chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "There's always a fight, isn't there?" Some days it seemed like he was healing. He would sit with Chidi, listen when he spoke, even help out in small ways around the house. Other days the darkness returned, fits of rage, long hours of silence, shadows in his eyes that had nothing to do with the setting sun. He watched over his son, guiding him back every time he strayed too far. The prophet's words echoed in his mind. Stay vigilant or the darkness will consume him. So he remained vigilant, and slowly, over time, Nonso began to change. The town never forgot what had happened. People still whispered when Nonso passed by. They still looked at Chidi with pity. But the tale of Nonso and Amaka lived on, passed down as a warning to mothers and fathers alike. A mother's love must come with boundaries, and desperation can lead to consequences far beyond imagination. I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.